So my name's Nagisa Manabe. I work for NOFA, New Jersey. Devin is on the line too. He's our executive director. This is all part of a land access grant that we have through the USDA FSA, and we this is the second year we've done this. Last year we started, and we found that every year is a new year because you could be just getting into this. You could have finally decided that maybe this is the time to get grants or whatever. So it's a two-part series. We're starting closer to home, state and local funding, and Billy's going to take the lead on that. Jacqueline is going to really talk more about the strategy, and then further she'll do the next week's session, which is going to be about federal grants and the planning that's required for that. Okay, so over to you guys because you're presenting.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Billy Connors. I'm the grants coordinator at the New Jersey Department of Agriculture. Honored to be here. Spoke a little bit last year at the last series of events. And I just love the mission here and trying to get the word out about grants and demystifying the process. It's a big objective of mine in my department, so I'm excited to be here. Bido, you want to introduce?
Greetings, everyone. I'm Dr. Jacqueline Bido. It's a pleasure to be here. And Billy is one of the people I love presenting with because it's definitely going to make it very palatable, very user-friendly. I also want to just manage your expectations as you're listening to this presentation and engaging in this two-part series. Really start reflecting on your organization, where you are, some of the needs that you have personally, and understanding that in all things grant, it's one step at a time. And so we are here to support you beyond this presentation. And so we're excited to get started. Thank you so much.
Awesome. I'm going to share my screen, get this presentation up. And I have this presentation available to share afterwards. If anybody's interested, we can always put that through the email chain post event. Let me share this. Okay. 1 second. Okay, all good. Everybody sees this?
Yes.
Great. All right. So, as I said, I'm Billy Connors, the grants coordinator. I'm just going to give you sort of a 30,000-foot overview of what I've seen in my experience as the grants coordinator at a state level, what works, what doesn't for state and local grants, and then give you some examples of some valuable language that's been used in grants that have been awarded. I think it always helps to see how people write successful grant applications and devise grant projects and what that might mean for you, at all levels of operation, whether you're just beginning or whether you've been in the game for a while. And I know actually I saw in the chat there's a lot of people outside of the New Jersey tri-state area, which is cool to see. So some of this might be relevant to you if you're in New Jersey. It might even be relevant to you if you're not New Jersey, but I'm going to have a New Jersey lens around this presentation. Feel free, though, afterwards to ask questions. A lot of the lessons here can be translated, outside the state, and are just good practice, whatever state you're practicing in. And so for my department, and in my role as the coordinator, I kind of have two roles. One role is to manage bringing funds into the State Department of Agriculture, and whether that's used for operating at the department level or passing it on to you, the farmer or the organization operating in the state. My job is to coordinate that, get the information out, collect the applications, and deliver the funding. And the other part of my job, which really isn't in my job description, but it's become part of my job, is to help the public of New Jersey who are interested in agricultural grants apply for those grants, even if they don't come through my department or through my office. And so oftentimes I get calls from constituents, calls from farmers, emails saying, hey, I saw this grant, it was interesting to me. And, I try to provide some expertise there and some advice going forward. But as it pertains to the New Jersey Department of Agriculture, we tend to offer a variety of grant programs. Some are revolving, some are novel, depending on the funding we get at the state and federal level. But really, they focus on a few main areas of interest, one of which is crop research. Researching new varietals, new methods of pest control, any other innovative concepts that are in regards to specific crops or industries. And that might seem a little far-fetched for you if you're an individual farmer, but as I'll say, go through later in this presentation, individual farms or groups of farmers can do, research on their farm, whether it's implementing a piece of equipment, researching the efficacy of that equipment, trying out new seeds that might be novel to the state, new crops. All of that can be done obviously at the institutional level with a Rutgers or Rowan University, but can be done on the individual farm or with groups of farms. We also have plenty of grant opportunities for farm infrastructure. I think that's a higher priority now at the state level than it's ever been, as well as at the federal level. And these grants cover everything from wildlife fencing, deer fencing, as we call it, or special purpose equipment for the farm. We also do a lot of marketing and promotion that's covered by grants. Typically, that's through the grant known as the Specialty Crop Block Grant, which I'll get into later in the presentation. And this is just how do you market your product? How do you market your farm? How does that benefit the industry? We also have through our State Agricultural Development Committee, which is the SADC, covers soil and water conservation. They work a lot with our USDA partners at NRCS to get grants out to help farms implement new strategies there. And we also do a lot of work with food recovery and gleaning, particularly through our gleaning grants and through some federal money that we used to get. It might look a little different now as we have a new administration. And actually, James Klett of Fairground Farm, who's on the call today, has done a lot with food security and food recovery. And I hope to call on him at some point in this presentation to speak about his experience with those grants. So the real purpose of this presentation is to try to break down and remove the layers to some of these complicated grant opportunities that might have dissuaded a lot of you from even applying for grants in the past. And a lot of that comes with the programmatic language, how these grants are offered to the public, what the funders are looking for. I think it's important to sort of take the formality away from it all and understand what they're actually asking when they post grant listings. And so I've broken it down into some key points. When you get or see an opportunity for a grant, whether it's at the state level, local level, and even federal level, as you'll see in the next series of events, it's key to just figure out what they're asking. And that comes in a document known as an RFA, which is a request for applications, a NOFO or NOFA, which is notice of funding opportunity, or an RFP, request for proposals. They all mean essentially the same thing. Grant funding is available. We're looking for people to apply. We're looking for projects to invest in. Find that document. That's the Bible for all grants. The second most important point is figure out when it's due, when our application's due. A lot of people might see a grant opportunity, might develop a great application, and I've seen it a number of times, and miss the due date. And a lot of funders are very strict. There's no extensions. So just identify when the application is due for the grant. Don't waste your time, writing something up for hours and then miss the deadline. Third point, identify your eligibility and the requirements for the projects that you're submitting. Again, goes with number 2. We don't want you to waste time filling out a complicated grant form, coming up with a very complex project, securing commitments from other farmers or other partners, only to find out that you can't actually lead the project or be the lead applicant for the grant. So again, seems all basic, but I think these are like steps that people often miss. When they see money, they get excited, they want to apply. Just make sure you have the foundation here for whether you're eligible and whether your project fits the funding priorities. And that leads into the fourth point, which is most grants, especially at the state and local level, will give you basically a sense of what they want to fund and how they're going to score your application for funding. It's almost like a cheat sheet or a study guide. You don't want to write your application just to fit the specific criteria that they're looking for, but it should be a heavy consideration when writing your grant. What are the priorities for funding? Do you maybe hit one of those priorities more than another? Does your project, can it be phrased in a way that really meshes well with what these funders are looking for? So definitely look for anything about scoring criteria, anything about priority areas of funding, and try to highlight that in your project as much as possible. And also, just fill out the forms in the way that the funders want. I see this at the USDA level all the time. Somebody might have a great application, but they convert the PDF form to Word, and then that's not accepted. It seems like we're splitting hairs, but that is, again, something that could throw away a really great application from being considered if it's not in the actual format. Again, this is all very technical stuff, but important to know, especially when you have a great concept that you want to have funded. Make sure you get the easy stuff right first. And so I have examples here of just what some of the RFPs and some of the grant opportunities look like. These are USDA and federal grants, but state level and local level, they'll be a lot simpler, but I think it's good to understand just in general what these type of documents look like. So again, find the request for applications, find the grant listing, the grant, the request for funding proposals, whatever it's called, figure out when it's due, figure out the requirements of the grant. I love to use Control F. I think everybody should implement that in their grant writing process. A lot of it is legalese, legal language that you can and should read, but in the essence of saving yourself some time, use Control F to figure out where's the eligibility section. Are there match requirements? Do I Control F find that? Where are the priorities? Save yourself the time because some of these documents will end up being 20, 25 pages. And I always recommend that you read them in full, but to make sure you save yourself time and completely understand what the grant is asking for, find these sections first. Navigate through all of the language to figure out if you're eligible and if you're not. And also feel free to ask questions. A lot of these programs will have a dedicated program manager or a contact for you to reach out to if you have questions. So if you're not sure about eligibility or you're not sure that the project fits what they're looking to fund, it doesn't hurt to ask. The answer you get varies depending on who's funding. Some are a little more transparent and honest than others, but it doesn't hurt to ask and definitely will save yourself some time in the long run. And again, as I said, there's scoring criterias. Most grant listings through an RFP or an RFA are required to actually put how they're going to score projects. So definitely find that, and figure out how to best present your application for these grant opportunities. So this brings us to what it takes to prepare your organization for an upcoming grant opportunity, even before these grants, whether they've even been conceived of yet or if they haven't even been published yet. How do you set your organization up the best to really jump and attack some of these opportunities and compete for this money? Things that I've seen work really well. Doesn't matter the size of the grant. It can be one of NOFA New Jersey's mini grants. It could be one of our department's mini grants. It can be a USDA LAMP grant for $300,000. Making sure you have shovel ready concepts. And this goes beyond just what you might think your organization needs, right? So you might have a need for a piece of equipment on the farm, or you might want to put up fencing, or you might want to refurbish a facility or do some modifications and improvements. Do you have a project that can encompass those investments, those changes to your business, that are larger projects that are ready to implement? And what I mean by that is, are you able to present the need for funding in a way that goes beyond the need, beyond just what you're asking for budget wise? Will you have impact? Is this a proof of concept that if you are able to execute it, can it be replicated down the line? Can another farm maybe use the same equipment in a similar way to benefit their own business? And so all of this plays into, how do I describe the need of me, the farmer, in a way that has some sort of outside benefit? And all of this comes from being ready with an idea, having a model in place to implement the project and the funding, and also having sustainability after funding. And that's something that Bido will talk about both in this call and the next. Grant funding is not meant to really just fund a project and then the idea of the project stops after the grant is over. There's obviously a timeline component with grants and the period of performance, but they want to make sure that this investment in your business or your organization will carry on well past the end of the grant period. And that plays into the last point. Grants should be viewed as similar to a bank lending you money for something in your operation, but even more than that. This is a type of investment where they want to see return. The funder wants to know, if I'm going to grant you money to do something, even if it's just as simple as buying a piece of equipment for a tractor, how is that going to grow with your business? How is it going to grow your operation past the grant cycle? And that comes with data. It comes with having these proof of concepts ready, assuring the funder that if we do receive this grant funding, that it'll be utilized and maximized going forward. And again, a conversation that I would love to have after this presentation is it's essential, even if this is just an investment on your farm. Do you have partnerships? And that can be everything from, I do a lot of business with another farmer or a wholesaler. I go to this farmer's market, and this farmer's market would partner with me on a project. Or it's you have a partnership with your local municipality or county. how can you extend the impact of this funding and show support that goes beyond your own organization? This is everything from getting a simple letter of support from another farmer or your county or the state that supports the work that you're doing and the project you're putting forth. It also comes with commitment of resources. I am going to receive this much grant funding. Can I put up something of my own or something from somebody else, whether that's coming from a partner who's providing match resources? How can I maximize the funding in that way? Organizational diversity. If I'm a one-man show, it's difficult to get funding from any level of grant funding. If you don't have the ability organizationally to handle that funding, and to have people who can operate different levels of the grant funding, and then having those relationships be sustainable, right? If I reach out to a farm that I did business with once and ask them to write a letter of support or partner on a project, is that a sustainable relationship? And a lot of funders can see through it. If you might write that you have all of this great connection with a certain number of groups, but if it's not sustainable, your project won't be successful, and it likely won't be successful even during time of review of your application. So these are all just things that I've seen work, things that look good. And then what does that look like on paper? What does that look like in the application itself? And so I've probably read hundreds of grant applications. I've been working at the department for a little under 2 years, so I anticipate that number will grow. But even in my early career, I've seen a lot of what works and I've seen a lot of what doesn't work. And a good example of what has worked actually comes from the last round of requests for proposals for the specialty crop block grant, which that is a USDA funded program, gets passed through my department down to the farmers and organizations of New Jersey. So technically it's a state program, but it's federally funded. And I have two examples here, and I'm going to break it down by what the program's asking for, how are you eligible, and then what the applicant in question wrote to win and get selected for funding. So the purpose of the program, there's not a lot of information asking about what they're looking to fund. The purpose of the program is to enhance the competitiveness of specialty crops. And I keep using the word specialty crop. Those words mean anything from fruit and vegetables, tree nuts, dried fruits, horticulture, nursery crops. It's basically anything for human consumption or outside of the commodity crops like grain, barley, corn, etc. So the eligibility requirements that this program sets are pretty varied. They really don't say who can necessarily apply, but it's any applicant that has a project, whether that's someone like a Rutgers at an institutional level or a farmer or group of farmers down to that level, who submit projects that can produce measurable outcomes for the specialty crop industry and or the public, as opposed to just an application coming from a business to support their own business. Again, this goes back to the point about partnerships. It goes back to collaboration. How can your grant project, even if it's just funding a single piece of equipment, how can that impact your community or your industry at large? And so the example here that I'm using, yes.
I want to stop and see if there are any questions before you keep going.
Sorry, I'm flying through.
I know. I'm just worried that some of these might be things that people want to ask questions about.
Yeah, please.
Does anybody have any questions so far? For example, I can give you an example that we have struggled with. Like some artisanal grains are not a specialty crop. Yeah. Even though they might be very specialized, that's the confusing thing about this.
Yeah.
This happens to come up every year. So
and that comes back to the point of every grant will have a program contact. If you have any doubt that you're not eligible, save yourself the time, reach out to them, call them, bug them, because a lot of these, especially when we're talking about state and local funders, we're taxpayer funded. So it's our job to answer you. It's our job to answer your questions. It's free. And so don't feel ashamed or embarrassed or uncomfortable to reach out and ask tough questions. Again, as I said, with me, you'll get a straight answer, but sometimes, certain funders are a little more, protective about what they give out to the public and how they answer those questions. But it does not hurt to ask and get clarification before you start this arduous process of writing a grant.
Okay, I probably incorrectly interrupted you because it seems like everything else is right on track. So keep
I
going.
think
It's
I'm well for the people. I saw somebody from Houston where I used to live in Houston. I'm from New Jersey and we talk fast. And so if I'm speaking too fast or this information is not hitting or not coming across correctly, please, you can just do what Nagisa just did and stop me because I do tend to carry on a little quickly. But anyway, the example that I wanted to use from the last specialty crop block grant cycle was actually from a group of farmers. And to give some context, especially for those who are out of state or might not be familiar with this program, this has traditionally been, at least in New Jersey, a grant that does not fund directly to farmers. There might be projects submitted by nonprofits, farm collaboratives, or collectives, sort of higher level groups that will trickle the impacts of this funding down to the farmer. That's typically how it went. However, we actually got a very compelling application from 3 New Jersey farms last year. And what they were proposing to do was to implement a shared equipment use model using to reduce soil pathogens in high tunnels with a soil steamer piece of equipment. And for context, I've been a farmer my whole life. My parents are 5th-generation farmers, and still, even some of this stuff is very novel and high level that it takes a little research. But this proposal that they were writing, and this is direct language from the application. What they wanted a piece of equipment to share amongst the 3 farms, with a component of education involved, where they would use the equipment on the farm, do some research on the farm, and then share and disseminate the results of that of the implementation of that equipment with other farms in the region. And their objectives were very clear. It fits with the priorities of the program, which were to enhance the competitiveness of specialty crops. So they said they were going to expand availability of the crops. They were going to reduce soil-borne pest and disease levels in high tunnel crops, and they were going to educate the farmers. So specifically in the specialty crop block grant, those are the 3 tenets of that program. It's education, it's marketing, and it's research. And so they cover those 3 points. Again, with a project as simple as we want to buy a piece of equipment to use on our farms. And so I think this language in particular for the farmers in the call today should be a good lesson for you to how do you convey a very simple ask, a simple investment into something that has a broader reach and impact. And so that's the takeaways here. Clearly defined project goals stemming from basic organizational needs, highlighted collaboration with other farms and the industry at large. And it's as simple as they had a problem and they're providing a solution. And that again, I think, is often missed. You might have a problem on your farm, but recognize that maybe other farms have a similar problem. And if I receive this grant and this investment, can we provide a potential solution for that problem and then aid other farmers or the industry at large in solving that problem? So this is a good producer side, farm side grant that I saw from last year. On the smaller side, this would almost be
really,
closer to what, yes.
I think the point to make here also is that that particular grant call comes up every single year, and
Yep.
I mean, I don't want to jinx us, but even in this changing environment, I would imagine that specialty crops will still be supported. So,
Yeah, it's a farm bill. I looked in the latest copy of the federal bill, budget bill, and the specialty crop block grant is included and protected, I think, for a certain amount of time. But the program's been around for decades at this point, and has been included in the farm bill over and over again.
But you could still help me.
Yeah.
I sent you an email.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you did.
But that's important to know too. Nagisa, do you mind muting? I'm sorry.
yeah.
There you go. Sorry. That, you might miss a window for one of these grant programs, the application window. But really understand that a lot of these programs, especially in agriculture, are revolving. And as long as there's an understanding that, obviously now there's programs that are being cut and changing in priorities at the federal level. If these programs are revolving and they come out the same way every year at the same time, that gives you a leg up as well, that if you might miss this year's application cycle, the documents for application for the priorities for funding are largely going to be the same in the following year. So it gives you extra time so that, typically grants are listed only for 30 to 60 days. That's how long you have to apply. Give yourself a leg up and get started early, even if it's not posted for next year's, application cycle. So yeah, that's a good point to make. So the next example I have is from a mini grant that we did at the state level. This is what you would probably see if you're talking about local grants, community, municipality grants. You would see something of this style. This is the Underserved Beginning and Military Veteran Farmer mini grant. It was up to $5,000 you could ask for, and it was for a wide variety of activities, expenses. And again, it's through the Specialty Crop Block Grant, but we broke it down into a much smaller, palatable grant for new, beginning, and underserved farmers. And we set the guidelines essentially as we're looking to invest in projects that will increase production, marketing, and research of specialty crops for any sort of expense for your business. So we left the interpretation wide open, and that comes with its own challenges, but we saw a lot of really creative and strong projects, even with the guidelines sort of being pretty basic. So this is very small text. So I'll just sort of sum it up. This applicant was asking for basically a green spinner in their processing facility. So they harvest a number of cut greens, spinach, mesclun, arugula, baby leaf lettuce. And they realized that with, the climate being the way it is, the heat, it was hard to keep and preserve those crops. And so what they were asking for was a green spinner. They wrote wonderful language here. They have connections to food safety, to efficiency in processing, and the overall quality of the product to market. And so I'm not going to read all of this. If you want to read it after we send this presentation out, feel free. But the point of me including all of this is to, again, hammer the point home that a lot of what you're asking for as a farm with a grant and a grant application, it's not going to be as complex as an institutional level Department of Health grant or a community-wide grant. These are grants for your farm. You might only have a few things that you're looking to fund through that grant, but how do you expand the ask to impact outside of your own business? I keep repeating that, but it really is important to note. They wanted new processing equipment. Instead of just saying, I need a green spinner because I need a green spinner, they talked about regulatory concerns, food safety. They identified priorities from the grant program that their project would contribute towards. Why would it have a larger impact outside of their own business? Again, it's as simple as creatively asking for what you need, for expanding the need on your farm to maybe needs on other farms. Could people use your project, use your implementation of the equipment for their own business? I feel like I'm really repeating it, but it is so important. And somebody like James Klett, who's on the call, who actually would like to speak at some point, can tell you that a lot of the grants that he's won at Fairgrown Farm were done and centered around very basic, specific needs on the farm, but presented in a way that shows that there is a need and an impact that could be had outside of their own business. And so that's really all I have. I figured it would be nice to open up the floor at this point and give plenty of time for everybody to ask questions, to go outside of the content that's been shared. I'm an open book, so feel free to ask any questions that you'd like. I'll also give Bido a time to maybe expand on some of the concepts we talked about today. But if that's really it for me, here is a great list of resources. Everybody always asks, where do I find out about grants? We have our department website at the NJDA that has a list of the state grants that we offer in agriculture. But there's a lot of clearinghouses and databases online that can offer an even wider reach for the available grants out there, including, grants from nonprofits, from philanthropy, local municipal grants that maybe we miss at the state level. So that's all linked here, and the presentation will be available after the call.
Do you want to
Anybody?
James
Yes.
talk now?
Yeah, James, do you mind? I don't know if you're still there. I know you're busy, but I would love for you to actually speak and give a little introduction.
Yeah, sorry. I was just called away to start talking about something, so I missed the last minute.
That's fine. I was kind of mentioning you as somebody who did a great job of taking a need that you had on the farm, whether it was, the equipment like the box truck or the garlic planter, and taking that need and writing a grant that shows a larger need for this, not just on the farm, but, if you were to execute your project, how could it be replicated? How could it be used by other farms? I would love for you to speak a little bit about your strategy there and how you devise some of these grants.
Yeah, no, 100%. Hi, everybody. James Klett from Fairgrown Farm. Billy mentioned we do a lot of work in food security now, and grant writing has actually become a big part of what I do. I mean, I've probably written 8 or 9 grants in the past 12 months. Yeah, I would say you really want to read that RFA, RFP thoroughly. And there's an art to it of figuring out where the needs of your business fit into what the grant writers are actually looking for. So in the situation that was mentioned about the beginning farmer grant, that like we got one from NJDA, that was easy because they were just looking for an excuse to give out that money. I mean, literally any type of program would have fit that benefited your farm. But if you get into a more complex application, like we just wrote 2 big applications for the AMS LAMP grant. So there was LFPP and FMPP, and those were big applications. And those are national, and so they really want to see a program that fits their agenda well. And I had my workers help me draft it. I wrote one, they wrote another, and I told them, you want to find a project that, like, as a business, is covering expenses that maybe we already have or going in a direction we want to go, right? Because it's easy to read these RFPs and say, oh, think of this really creative project we could do that is exactly what they want. And that might have a good chance of success, but then you're going to pigeonhole yourself later down the road. And, our jobs here as farmers is not to, be government employees that do exactly what we think an RFP wants. Our job is to figure out what business solution, right? What farm solution can we propose that is going to fit their bill, but also benefit us and build the food system in some sort of way. And building the food system for most of these is really what people want to see. So one of our projects, we were able to say, hey, we're going to leverage this existing infrastructure that we already have as a farm to start doing more aggregation and distribution throughout the state. As a direction we already wanted to go. So we weren't putting ourselves in a weird position where we had to, do something outside of our comfort zone. We were designing a project that was really based on the operations our company already did. And then we said, we have this equipment on our farm. All sorts of farms throughout New Jersey have this, right? So if you have a project that's revolving around a dairy barn, like we proposed one that was actually unsuccessful, to turn a dairy barn into a packing facility. But what we were able to say is, hey, tons of old farms have these dairy barns. This plan to repurpose it at this fixed budget could be replicated in all these different places. And here's why that's a viable, feasible thing. So yeah, it really comes down to the individual application, but go into every single RFP as like an opportunistic, sleazy business person who's saying, okay, this is what they want. This is what I need. How do we bring those 2 things together?
Right. And it's important also to note that James does a really good job of accurately describing and illustrating what his business actually is, what it does, who they serve. And a lot of that comes from data. It comes from being a good writer. But I think something to note too is, these funders, unless they're like very local and very familiar with your operation, have no idea who you are. They have no idea what the challenges are in your community. They have no idea what the challenges are in your farm. So that's also a really important section to be descriptive, to be very clear. I don't like to say like treat the reviewer like they're 5, but these people often have no idea what the challenges are, especially if it's a state grant or even a federal grant, what the challenges are in your locality. So that's something to be clear about too. Everybody has challenges. We are facing challenges right now, especially in funding. But why is that unique? Why is that uniquely important, not just to you, but to your community and to the industry?
Well, and I'd throw in something real quick there, which is
Yeah.
you have to simultaneously treat them like they're 5 and they don't know anything,
Yeah.
but also give them a ton of credit because they are reading applications
A
nonstop.
ton.
And
Yeah.
what they are really, really good at is noticing if your thing seems completely unfeasible. So if you're saying we're going to, generate tens of millions of dollars and this project is going to have this tremendous impact and one person is going to do 500 different things, they're going to see those as red flags. And the best applications I have read are ones that are realistic and down to earth, saying this is what our organization does, this is what I think we could do. And it's not, overshooting it. It's fairly realistic. And last thing I'll throw in is don't be afraid to ask for help, right? So Billy's a fantastic resource. Devin, other people are always willing to read your application. And like one thing that I did for one of these past applications we did, which was for the LFPP, which is a really big, hefty grant that I didn't know how to write, is I found all the past awardees and I just sent them emails saying, can I get some info about what you felt was successful and just, maybe read my application. Half of them sent me their entire applications. These were people who successfully got it. So I have 10 successful LFPP applications that I was able to read and reference when I was writing mine. So always leverage the resources around you and don't be afraid of collaboration, because this is where it's going to really help.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And yeah, that's James told me he got the actual applications from other awardees, and I just thought, damn, I never even thought to do that. It's brilliant. So yeah, again, it's an industry that in New Jersey, it's unique that I think we're starting to have more collaboration amongst people in the agricultural community. It's also an aging community of people that maybe are not as receptive to what the younger generation of farmers are trying to do. You might run into that, but I think by and large, it never hurts to knock on a door and never hurts to ask. And then one more point I wanted to make too that James kind of brought up, and I know that James would agree with me here. Understand if you're ready for a grant as a farmer, and I know we're having a call about, applying for grants and how and best strategies when looking to apply for grants, but your business might not be at the right level or at the right stage for a particular grant opportunity. And that comes into the point about that James made about feasibility. You might want to do something and you might think you can do it, but they've read plenty of applications from plenty of applicants, often in many different industries and sectors. They'll know if it's feasible or not. And so that's a conversation you have to have internally with yourself and with your organization. Are we in the right standing to take on a grant or to initiate a grant project? That could go ahead.
You can answer the question that was in the chat
Yeah,
about
hold on.
can individuals apply or is it only for organizations?
I would say it is unless the grant explicitly states that individuals are eligible. It's almost what I've seen. It's always through the farm business, and that means whether you're incorporated or you have an LLC. It is hard. I think there's more risk associated with even if you're a sole proprietor, funding an individual for a lot of these grants, at least the ones that I see. Again, when you get down to the local level, that can change. Again, that information will be explicit in the RFP or RFA.
Right.
So it's not boxing you out. I don't think sole proprietors are boxed out. It just, you got to be careful. And again, ask the question of, as a sole proprietor or an individual, am I eligible?
Yeah, I think it's linked to the point you were making, that it just shows readiness or
Yep.
not readiness,
Yep, agree. I think I exhausted the points I wanted to make. Did I miss anything else in the chat?
No, I don't think so. People are asking, can they have a presentation? And
Yeah.
of course, I will get the final attendee list from Devin, then I'll send it out to everybody. Okay.
Great.
Anybody else with a question? Feel free to jump right in.
I do have a question for our attendee.
Go ahead.
Might be muted. No?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. I did have a question for our attendees. Thus far, what has been, in your purview, some of the most challenging parts of submitting a grant on this level? Because I think by getting that feedback, whether in the chat or if somebody may raise their hands and come off mute, we'll get more information on how better to assist you outside of this session. And so if we could get some feedback on thus far, what has been the most challenging for you?
Don't be shy, folks. Coral's raising her hand. Coral, do you want to?
Yes, I would say having the capital. I asked this question in the chat if grants are limited to business credit because I have seen that with some grants.
Yeah, are you referring to like having in kind or like matching resources on hand during application?
Yeah, capital and
Yeah.
yeah.
I would say and that's where if you don't have a lot of some grants don't, right? So some grants might not have a match requirement. They might take a financial statement, but they're not using in the selection process, what you're putting up for the project. But if you're struggling if it is a cost share or has a matching requirement, that's where collaborating with a larger organization, and maybe whether they're donating resources to you or contributing resources to you, whether that's staff, whether that's facilities, stuff that has a dollar value that can be put up to the project. That's where the partnership comes into play. And I think it's, there's a twofold effect, right? You're not only you're gaining some footing and some resources to put up for the grant project, but you also are developing a partnership with maybe a more mature organization or an organization that has received grants in the past or is familiar with grant projects, or has a bigger reach. So I think that's where reaching out to other interested organizations, whether that be farmers, nonprofits, community groups that have the backing to sort of uplift your application and uplift your project, that's where that helps. And that just comes with knocking on doors and asking questions and trying to connect with people, which isn't easy. I know that, but that's how you get around some of maybe the capital requirements or match requirements that would be imposed by a grant.
Yeah, I'm going to build on that. When I first started writing grants, I partnered with the principal of a local elementary school on a farm to school grant. And why that was really helpful was he had won many, many grants over the years. And he did two things really well. He creatively identified matching funds. So, because he could look at the school budget and say, hey, the school spends on field trips. And since they spend on field trips, we can count that towards the grant, et cetera, et cetera. So, if you partner with an expert writer, that is very helpful. And the second point he made was make the reading of your grant fun. So don't, if it says like 1,000 word requirement for one question, don't write 1,000 words, write 800, make it an easy read. People appreciate that and will probably read your grant more carefully if it's fun to read. So, if it can be said in less words, say it in less words, I think.
Yeah, and that goes to James' point about fluff, right? And like you might feel like you have to write a lot, but again, consider that they're reading potentially hundreds of applications at a time. And yeah, I think the creativity with match requirements, I had a point about that, but I didn't really elaborate further. That often is governed by what's in the RFP or RFA. They might actually list what's qualified as a match or cost share for a particular grant, but people often don't realize your time often counts. So if you have staff that are going to be executing this project or associated with this project, maybe at 25% effort level or 50% or even 100%, that can be considered as match. And if you don't have cash on hand or the resources capital to put up as a match, your time is a valuable match resource. And I don't really think it's viewed any differently, whether you have cash or you have the appropriate staff who can dedicate time. I think obviously cash and a capital investment or a capital resource is always valuable. But if they're allowing for in kind, which is your salary or something that you could put up in that way that's not have a dollar value to it like that, I don't think there's anything wrong with putting your time and your salary up as a match resource.
I would also add in regards to fluff or detailed writing, the way to really manage that is by always saying to yourself, after you read your proposal, the organization actually has to mirror this proposal. You have to be who you say you are on paper. And when you hold yourself to that reality, you'll read your proposal and realize, can I really live up to this in real life? If they did a site visit tomorrow, if they go to our website, which they will, if they ask me to send our 990, which they will, if they decide that they want to do an audit, which sometimes they will. These are all realities of who you are. I always say be as authentic as possible. And the one thing that always transcends paper is the actual work that you put in your communities. And that is the reality. So the work that you put in, and even in pilot programs, the work that you put in order to create pilot programs transcends on in your writing when it's real. And so always be as authentic as possible to who you are as an organization and partner with people that also align with your values as an organization. Because I always tell people in different sessions that we've had is like, you have something that you do bring to the table, whether you're a large organization or a small one. And knowing exactly what that is that you bring will always keep you partnering with the right fit.
Yep. Agreed.
I think there's a question in the chat about interested to look into a possible grant to assist with an industrial hemp building workshop. Any suggestions?
I'll email you, Kristen. My email. Oh, by the way, we can. Nagisa, do you mind sending this out to the whoever's
Yes.
registered? We'll have an offline conversation about that. There's not much that I know of, but there might be a way to look elsewhere in the state for that kind of funding.
Yeah, I would say if that's the answer, then I suggest calling Steve Komar. He's at Rutgers and
Yeah.
he works on hemp. So
Yeah, that's a
he might
great
have
point.
some good ideas. Yeah.
And I would just chime in on that one of the other collaborations you can be seeking in order to seek other funding is through connecting through holistic nutrition, holistic medicine, and also institutions of health that are actually researching how hemp can be integrated into treatment.
Yeah, another place to look is Winona LaDuke is very into industrial hemp, and if you go to her site or try and connect with her, she may have some very interesting tips for you on how you might approach that. So
I see something else in the chat. I don't like all the restrictions that some grants come with. I would tend to agree. But I think it's important also to note that a lot of this money is taxpayer money. And in an ideal world, as someone who has an understanding of the industry, that we would just give the money out and you could do the work. But there is a financial responsibility on our end and on your end to make sure that the funds are, expended correctly, that they're utilized correctly, and that we also have something to show for the money too. You know, it's not intentional to create reporting requirements that are arduous or long or taxing, especially as all of your job is not to manage and write grants, it's to do the work in the field. But that is just what comes with the territory of taxpayer money. But that's also something that, when you find a contact like myself, or you can talk to other people who've won grants like James, or, in consultation with a group like NOFA, that's where you can help. They will help navigate you and give you advice about how to navigate some of those restrictions. They're not meant to be prohibitive. I know they often are, and they often box people out, but there's a way to manage those restrictions, right?
Right. I had
And I
posted
would
that.
also,
Yeah.
I just wanted to elaborate on that, as far as when grants are okay, it's for this, or especially when it's grassroots, I have a nonprofit organization that teaches people, Afro-Indigenous techniques of how to grow and etc. So, I'll apply for these grants and we're small, so that we'll get grants and they'll be like, oh, you could only use it for this, no overhead or no other areas, when it's kind of we barely have any money, we're just getting started with this. And that's what I meant about the, because, and then, I do think, and I'm like, some people can be irresponsible. They have so many people in the world, you kind of have to put stipulations, like you said, on taxpayer money. But some of the restrictions, it's just gosh, I wish we could use it for this little area that needs help with our organization that is just beginning, or our farm situation that's just beginning, because it's okay, you have this grant and you can only use it on soil. It's
Right.
So that's what I meant by that.
Yeah. And I view a grant often. Yeah, go ahead.
so to that, I would say one, I don't want you to be discouraged. This is the journey that we've all been through, so I understand your frustration. One of the things that you can do when I tell people about restricted grants is really understand how much of this programming can I get funded through this restricted grant. So whether it's only soil, what program can I build out of only soil? Because once you have that price point, or you say, in order to conduct this workshop, it takes $2,000 for the trainer to come in and handle this soil that I've already gotten funded. I can then market that $2,000 to a in-kind donation to a corporation that may want to bring that in as a activity for their employees on a professional development day. Like, I want you to start thinking super outside the box, where those programs can be micro programming that can start building the unrestricted funds that you need in order to continue to grow as a grassroots organization.
Mhm. Well said.
Yeah, thank you for that, because that like lit a bulb in my head. Like, ooh, you absolutely right. Yeah. Yes, that's what this is for.
Don't give up. We're here for you. We've been in these grassroots trenches. We understand totally. We'll help you through the navigating that. And then another thing about restricted grants, I would say, is the restriction helps you modify your programming budget and fine tune it. Oftentimes we go into creating programs and we want a million bells and whistles, when it really may only take these fine tuned things and really refining how we deliver our services. I always make sure to tell people, like, just because we have the resources, how are we expending them is very important, because it's about service to our people and how are we transcending these resources in the most effective manner. And so sometimes they may feel restricted in nature, but what is the impact value that we're making? And so always attach an impact value when somebody is
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Absolutely.
Great questions. Love it.
Any more?
I got nothing else, but if anyone else has any other questions.
Okay, I think we've covered it. So let's end on time. Yeah. Okay. If you have follow-up questions, I'm going to send out the recording, the presentation, and Billy's email, so you'll have all three of those things. And we look forward to seeing you hopefully next week as well. We're going to follow up with a broader look at the federal grant picture, which I know has been very frustrating recently, but there are still opportunities out there. So I encourage you to dial in again next week. All right. Have a great, cool day.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.